There you go. We got you.
Hi,
How's it
how are you?
going? All right, guys.
Good.
So first off, thank you so much for doing this. And so just quickly, we're gonna, while people kind of come in, guys, I'm doing an Instagram live with Manvi, who is a non-for-profit company that helps domestic violence victims, along with other things. We have Navneet Bhalla here, who is the executive director of Manvi. So um, why don't you explain what your position with Manvi is?
Sure. Hi, thank you so much for having me. First of all, I really appreciate it. And thank you to everyone who's joining. So, Manavi is a South Asian women's rights organization. We're a nonprofit based right here in New Jersey. Manavi was the very first South Asian women's organization founded in 1985. So, we've been around for 35 years. Our mission is to end all forms of gender-based violence in the South Asian community. And we have a range of services that we provide. You want me to go into the services
Yeah,
now?
go ahead.
I can.
Just go right into it.
Sure. So basically, we provide a range of services, like we provide culturally specific and linguistically appropriate counseling. We provide advocacy. We have a 24-hour hotline, which is staffed by our very dedicated volunteers. We're all trained, and all our staff and volunteers, including myself, we all speak a whole range of South Asian languages to ensure that our service is culturally specific. We have a robust legal advocacy program and provide legal clinics, referrals. We also provide medical and court accompaniments. One of the most important services that we provide is Ashiana, which is our transitional home. That was founded in 1997. And it's the only culturally specific South Asian transitional home of its type on the East Coast. So that's something very dear to me and all the staff and volunteers. What it is essentially is that it's a rent-free facility where we house survivors and their children, and we ensure that we provide culturally specific groceries. All our services are provided to all the survivors and residents at Ashiana. And of course, and the period of stay can range anywhere between a few months up until a year and a half, and even then we kind of reassess. Our goal is to make sure that we work with our survivors so closely that they're able to become financially, emotionally independent and be able to integrate into society, and they feel fully empowered.
That's amazing. And this is a non-for-profit company, and your services are free of charge, correct?
Absolutely. We are a nonprofit and all our services are free. We also have support groups for survivors that we hold regularly. Yes, so there is no charge for the services that we provide as a nonprofit.
No, that's absolutely amazing. I mean, domestic violence is a difficult topic on a good day, well, a normal day, let's just say. And now during quarantine and what's going on with coronavirus, it seems like some of the victims of domestic violence are kind of locked up with their aggressors. It's kind of a scary time. What have you been seeing on your side? Has there been an uptick in domestic violence or?
So yes, you're absolutely right. I think at the best of times, domestic violence is something that's very, very difficult for any survivor who's going through it, but particularly during a global pandemic. I just want people to realize and appreciate that essentially a survivor is quarantined with their abuser.
Yeah, scary.
And to think about that dynamic and the power and control that's exercised by the abuser over their survivors at the best of times, but during an epidemic when they are totally isolated, and isolation is one of the main issues that we always worry about, because right now the survivors who are in quarantine with their abuser, they are totally cut off from all their community groups, whether it's a place of worship, whether it's schools, their children are cut off from all those support systems. So it's particularly difficult. And some of the things that we're seeing are that the domestic violence and the nature of it is much more intense and much more severe. Some of the things that maybe we don't ordinarily see, we are seeing that.
Wow.
But at the same time, there's also a greater reluctance by the survivor to report, because if you think about it, they are relying on their perpetrator, the abuser, to provide, in many cases, to provide the financial security, the groceries, a roof over their heads, all those fundamental things which are a source of concern for all of us in the pandemic now. But imagine being in that situation in quarantine with your abuser.
It's scary because you can't even like leave. Like maybe some people might have been able to like go to a friend's or family's house, and maybe some people are scared because of, you know, the virus. And so these guys, you know, these people in these abusive relationships, they're really stuck. Yeah, I mean, so you kind of also kind of jumped into like some of the challenges that they're foreseeing, you know, right now. So I guess what are the different types of domestic violence, and you know, what are the differences?
Sure. And I also want to kind of start by actually defining what domestic violence means.
Perfect.
Very often when people think about domestic violence, they assume that it's some kind of, you know, injury or a physical nature only. So just to define what domestic violence is, it's a pattern of behavior over where basically the abuser is exercising power and control over the victim. And domestic violence, as you rightly said, it comes in many forms. It's not just physical. So there are a whole range of forms of abuse, including emotional abuse, verbal abuse, psychological abuse, financial abuse, sexual assault, and even, you know, we see situations, particularly in our community, where marital rape is not understood or acknowledged as a form of abuse. And you know, that's something that we find many individuals sometimes struggle with in coming to terms with and acknowledging that that is a form of abuse. And very often we see that physical abuse or sexual assault or sexual violence is not something you see right away in the early stages. It's over a period of time that behavior of power and control escalates, and that's when, you know, we see that it can lead to physical or sexual violence. But just to reiterate, domestic violence doesn't have to be just physical. It comes in many forms, and it's where the survivor or the victim feels power and control is being exercised over their behavior in everyday life.
Yeah, so it's, you know, verbal, physical, sexual. There's many different types of abuse. So it's not just like if somebody hits you, but there's, you know, even dominance on somebody, and just kind of like mentally abusing people. Where, you know, I unfortunately I've seen this, you know, more personally than I would have wanted. So then where does really like normal, where does normal relationship fighting cross the line into, you know, abuse?
I think the key element here is where you feel you are no longer in control of your life. And it doesn't have to be big things. It could really be little things, which are just as significant. You know, if you feel that you're in a relationship where you are being constantly degraded, your self-worth is being destroyed over a period of time, you feel that you are unable to be in control of making decisions on a day-to-day basis, what you wear, what you eat, where you go. If you're being prevented or stopped from making those decisions and feeling that you are not really in control of your life, whether it's your work, your personal life, the way you raise your children, and a constant degrading, you know, or mistreatment of the way that you're spoken to and your self-esteem. So it can be a range of behaviors where I think the key element really is where the abuser is exercising power and control, and that's something that we always refer to.
Yeah, like, well, my sister, Dr. Biba Singh, is a psychiatrist, and so she does come across this, and so she was telling me like it could be like you said, it could be a slow grow where all of a
Mm-hmm.
sudden, you know, you're scared to leave the house, you're scared to meet your parents, you're scared to meet your friends, and
Right.
you know, you get depressed. You may not want to, like, you may be sleeping more hours a day, you may be eating more hours a day, because what happens is that sometimes it's like it's such a small and slow growth that you might not even realize what's happening, and then all of a sudden you're living a fearful life where, you know,
Right.
you might not be able to see your friends and family. So
Right.
that brings me up to my next point is, you know, I've unfortunately seen some abusive relationships developing. Like, what would somebody who's viewing from a third person perspective, what can they do if they're seeing someone being abused? Like, should we approach them? Should we not approach them? How do you approach? Should you call somebody?
Sure. Sure. And I also wanted to touch on sexual violence, which we can do in a minute.
Sure.
So, just to answer your question, at Manavi, we take a very survivor-centered approach, and so do most, if not all, domestic violence agencies, which essentially means that the survivor, and when I use the term survivor, we are referring to the victim, but we use the term survivor in our area of work. The survivor knows their situation best. We really rely on the survivor to know what they want to do. We are there to provide ongoing support, but essentially, and more importantly, they're the ones that make the decision. So if you are a friend or a neighbor and you are aware of any kind of abuse, or you feel that someone may be, in an abusive relationship, I think it's really important that you don't jump to just intervene, because sometimes, and very often, that intervention can make the situation much worse.
That's true.
For that survivor. You may, with all best intentions, feel that you're being helpful, and you may, have a knee-jerk reaction to intervene to help. But it's really important to be mindful that very often that immediate intervention, without speaking to the survivor and making sure that ultimately they're aware of the dangers and the concerns and how volatile the situation can be. So the sort of things to do are, firstly, to make sure that you establish a safe mode of communication. We see situations where friends or neighbors start calling or texting thinking they're helping, but then the abuser is alerted to that. They become aware, and that really makes the situation much worse.
It's true. A cell phone might not actually be, it might be monitored.
Yes. The phone might be tapped, their emails might be monitored. So I think the very first thing we would say is to establish a safe mode of communication, and that's something you need to find out from the survivor themselves. It could be texting, but it may not be. It could be, Instagram message, it could be Facebook message, it could be texting. So you just need to kind of talk to them to see what is a safe mode of communication. And then secondly, just as a practical piece of advice, you could think of some code words where, if you can establish some kind of basic code language, and that can
just
apply.
A second, we lost you for a second. Yes. There. All right, so just go back maybe a couple seconds. You were talking about passwords.
Yes, so like a code word. So for example, and that's something we also encourage if you have children and you're in an abusive relationship. So if you have a neighbor or a friend, you could say, think of a code word which could alert them to call the police if something imminent, or if there's an imminent danger, or you feel things are about to get worse. So I think establishing some kind of code word with your neighbor or friend, but at the same time also with your children, if you feel that the situation might get worse. These are practical things in the moment, that if something were to happen, that talking to your children in advance, that these are some of the things that if they need to call the police. But again, I'm going to go back to, it has to be and needs to be what the survivor wants to do and what the survivor themselves feel is the safest thing to do. And also, I think other things you can do are, you can be the friend who does the research for them. So you can really look at which county they're in. In New Jersey, we have over 30 domestic violence agencies, and every county has them. So I think you can be that friend who looks up hotline numbers, who looks up in their county, is there, which domestic violence agency is available, what services they provide, is there a shelter if the situation warrants it. Doing all that research on resources and checking with them what is the best way or safest way to pass that on. And if they need your help and support, to connect with that domestic violence agency. And also making sure that when you're connecting, making sure you relay that it's not their fault.
Yes.
I think that's the thing that they need
people
to
feel
hear
guilt.
from
They might feel guilt, like, is it because of me that this is not working?
Absolutely. And very often the abuser will make the survivor believe that it's their fault. They have such power over the survivor that they will convince them that the behavior that they're being subjected to, the abuse that they're being subjected to, is because the survivor did XYZ, which is totally and blatantly false.
Yeah, it's a sense of control right there. It's mind kind of mind washing a little bit.
Absolutely, like brainwashing, and just making sure that they understand that you believe everything they're saying and that it's not their fault and you are there for them.
Okay, well, that's some amazing advice, to reiterate. Don't just, if you see something, don't just jump right into it, because for example, the aggressor might feel embarrassed and then all of a sudden lash out on the other the victim in this situation. And then so kind of getting a safe mode of communication between each other, and and also some keywords that you could be using. So this is all amazing advice. You mentioned before we jumped into this topic that you wanted to discuss a little bit more about sexual abuse.
Yeah, so very often people we talk about domestic violence, but I also want to address that domestic violence and sexual violence are two distinct forms of abuse. And there are different agencies that focus on those. At Manavi, we provide support for both forms of abuse and services. But again, to kind of point out, in terms of what does that look like? What is sexual violence? What is sexual assault? So again, to point out that it really encompasses anything where any behavior of sexual nature, which which is unwanted, where you haven't consented, where you haven't given your consent, and also where there may be any form of coercion. So, it's not, again, with the sexual violence or sexual assault, very often people think that, it's like when you're walking down the street or a dark alleyway and a stranger kind of assaults you. But we see sexual violence takes place a lot and in alarming rate within families, within homes, within an intimate partner relationship. And it's not just husband and wife. We're also talking about any intimate partner relationship.
Girlfriend, yeah, anything.
Could be dating. We see that a lot where it's and here's something I do want to highlight. In the South Asian community, I'm sure this may be the case in other communities, but at least in South Asian community, we do see, and this is a source of concern for us, where if there is some stigma or taboo associated with dating, then those young South Asian survivors are even more reluctant to talk about abuse in a dating relationship. They are more reluctant to go and talk to their parents because they're afraid of the repercussions that they'll know. So anyone listening, I want all of you to be mindful of those things too, that we're not just talking about a husband-wife relationship, we're talking about abuse within a dating relationship, a parent and child, any kind of domestic environment or relationship. So we as a community need to be mindful and aware and be there for our children as well as our peers and families.
And I don't think that people could realize, sometimes people don't realize how bad this could get. There was an unfortunate event that took place in Jersey City not too long ago where a restaurant owner of Nukud, Garma, unfortunately was the victim of a domestic violence. It was a murder-suicide. It was a very terrifying situation, very sad. But you know, it could get really bad, and people need to realize this is not something that should be taken lightly.
Absolutely. And Garima's case is, her story is very tragic. It's very tragic, but unfortunately also something more common than we'd like to admit. And I think it's really important for us, again, as a community, as a South Asian community, to talk about this openly, that, you know, when these kind of tragic incidents or is really a homicide where there were upper body injuries and there was violence in a domestic setting. So I think it's important for us to use the right terminology and acknowledge that there was domestic violence, there was abuse, and not always try to hide behind that. And, you know, in those kind of situations, it really breaks my heart, because there are situations where things escalate and very often people don't come forward to seek help because either they're told or they believe that this is something they need to resolve within their own household and it's a private matter.
And some people may think that maybe there is no help out there. You know, some people might just feel like nobody could do anything, so I got myself into this or something, you know? And a lot of these aggressors they're very tricky. And I've unfortunately had, not personal with me, but I've seen it happen to someone else, where when you're out in public, like, it looks like a normal relationship, or the aggressor actually makes it seem to everyone else like that person's being crazy or something like that. So you got to be careful. And if a victim speaks out, you have to be very careful and you know, listen to them, because if they're saying something, whether or not it looks like something else is happening, that take them seriously with exactly what they're saying.
Right, absolutely. And you know, I just want to share one thing. When Manavi was founded, this is going back like in 1985, it was founded by these 6 strong, dynamic women at the time. And I have been told stories, and we still have like one of the staff who've been with Manavi for 15 years. And I'm thankful, I am so thankful to all our dedicated staff and volunteers. It's really because of them that Manavi is where it is today. So I'm forever grateful to them. And one of the stories that one of the staff members had relayed to me from the early days when Manavi was founded, that when they started out and when they would go in the community to talk about domestic violence, there were some people in the community who would refer to them as home wreckers.
That's crazy.
So if you think about the cultural dynamic, and this is why I mentioned earlier that for many people even today, domestic violence or abuse is seen as something that's a private matter. They don't want it to be talked about openly in the community because it makes us look bad. So, you know, we've come a long way since 1985. Wow. when you know, Manavi staff or someone out there who was talking about it was referred to as that, but we still have a long way to go.
And I agree. And you know, this is all amazing information. I think people could really learn a lot from all of this. So we talked about, you know, what we could do if we see somebody else, you know, getting abused. What can the person, like, what can you give advice if there's somebody watching that is being abused? You know, what should they do? What can they do to get out of this relationship, especially right now?
Right. So a very important piece of information to be aware of is that leaving an abusive relationship is actually the most dangerous time for a survivor. So that's something that's important for everyone to be aware of. So I think that's where we talk about things like safety planning. Safety planning is a very important component. I can talk about that.
Yeah, we should touch on that.
Yeah, but I think if you are in an abusive relationship, and very often someone who's in that relationship may or may not decide to leave immediately. Sometimes they go through a whole process and they have their own journey. And we recognize that and we are aware of that. So, you know, we have a 24-hour hotline. So I would say that you can call Manavi at anytime. I myself have taken hotline shifts at times with all the staff and volunteers. So call us anytime if if the hotline is difficult, you can email us at manavi@manavi.org. Our hotline number I want to share here is 732-435-1414. You can also reach us via Instagram and Facebook. So what we would do, or advocates would do, is make sure that we work very closely with you to ensure that we provide the support in a safe way, but also walk you through the different aspects of safety planning. So just to kind of go through it quickly, if someone is, so the safety planning varies depending on whether you're planning to leave or safety planning during the pandemic right now. So again, some of the practical things would be, if you think you're in a relationship where you may need to leave, making sure all your documentation, whether it's your immigration documents, your identification, your bank details, your doctors, your child's birth certificate, you'll be surprised how many times we have seen survivors having severe challenges once they've left and not have all these things. All that documentation at hand, so you have it. If you feel you need to have some of your immediate, like basic belongings in a bag. But again, I say that with caution. Only do so if you think you're in a relationship which won't tip off your abuser. Having the bag, and also making sure you have all the contact numbers at hand, whether it's your local police department. We always say that if it's an emergency, you call 911, always. Making sure your neighbors know, making sure a friend that you have, and using that code language that I was referring to earlier. And the only other thing practically I'll say is that this is when the abuse takes place in the moment, that although there is no safe space in your home, thinking about what is the least dangerous space in your home, meaning going to a room where there are no sharp objects, things that can be thrown about, windows. So these are practical things, you and your children. So you know that if you have to retreat immediately to a space in the house, and retreating to a place where there is exit. So not a bathroom or the kitchen, but a space where there's
a window,
exit. So,
maybe, or even a door.
So thinking strategically, if you happen to be in a situation or a relationship where there's imminent danger, but otherwise long term, Manavi is here for you, and you can call us anytime.
Anyone can call?
Anyone can call. We serve anyone. We serve women and men, just so everyone knows. We have male survivors too, who statistically the number is lower, but we do serve any survivor. And also I want to highlight here, we serve any survivor in any relationship, which includes the LGBTQI community. If you're a survivor who happens to be in that relationship, or any relationship of a domestic nature, we are here to support you.
It's amazing. So again, let's reiterate, because you really dropped some very important knowledge there. If you're, planning on leaving, safety planning, take all your documents. Your abuser could hold those things hostage later on. Passports, birth certificates, everything, kind of have those with you. If you're going to have a to-go bag, just be very careful that your abuser doesn't know that you have created that and are getting ready to get out of that relationship. Because things could get really sour and really bad in the last second. If you are in imminent danger, call 911. And if you can, find a room in your house that is safe, doesn't have sharp objects or anything that could be used as a weapon, that also has a way for you to leave the house, whether it's a window or a door. Don't go into your bathroom, because you're stuck in there then. There's nothing you could do. And what if you get into the bathroom, you don't have a phone on you? So these are all amazing tips that I didn't even think of these things. And that's why, people, you guys should call Manavi. If you are in an abusive relationship, she mentioned the number, and I'm going to have that number available later once I post this. It'll be on the video.
Sorry, just to point out, you mentioned the phone. Not all our survivors have phones, but phone is something that is really like a lifeline. So one of the things we suggest is that if, making sure you also need to have some basic financial means when you're thinking about exiting or leaving. So having at least some money at hand, and also a phone or a phone card. which you could use depending on what kind of phone you have. All these things we can help you with, but making sure that you have some kind of financial means and some money. But the other piece, which I don't know if we're going to go into later in terms of restraining order, I wanted to mention.
Oh,
but
yeah,
I'll wait.
no, let's go right into it. Whatever you think is important for anyone to hear.
So the other thing, of course, is if you are being subjected to abuse and you feel unsafe in any relationship, of course, if, like we said, if it's imminent danger, you call 911. If it's an emergency, other than that, you can call your local police station. You can get something called a TRO, which stands for Temporary Restraining Order. That is something you can get either going to your local family court. You go there and they can, if you need help with that, you call us at Manavi, and our advocates can absolutely help you and walk you through that process. So you can get it through the court, or you can actually just call the police if it's outside court hours, and the police can call the judge outside hours. It doesn't have to be 9 to 5. It could be weekend or any other time, and they can help you get that. What does that mean? It basically means it's a temporary restraining order for a period of 10 days where your abuser is not allowed to come anywhere near you. They can't be at your home, your place of work. They're not allowed to contact you, telephone, text, any form of contact. And you can include in that TRO things like emergent relief, which is financial means. You can actually include that they need to pay during this period for your bills and things. And after that, I won't go into all the technical details, but after the TRO 10-day period is over, you're entitled to something called an FRO, which is a final restraining order. And that really means that you then go to a court, there's a hearing, and if the judge believes that, the case that you've presented warrants a final restraining order, you get that, and that means it's permanent. It's really like a final restraining order, and you are safe. So there are different, there's a civil remedy and criminal, and I think it's best if you contact us separately. We can go through the technical details with you on the phone.
Well, you actually brought up a very good point that kind of reminded me of something. My other sister, Rabina, used to be a social worker, and so she had mentioned to me that she's also come across this as well. So she had said that she recommends that people sometimes maybe file a police report with nothing that is going to cause any action, but throughout the process, right? So that there's some sort of a record. Do you recommend that people go and, quietly, if they have a time, go to the grocery store or whatever, and maybe file a police report showing that this is not something that all of a sudden happened at once, that this has been going on? But what is your thought on that?
Absolutely, absolutely. Because when you apply for a TRO, what they're really looking for is you're talking about, and you're relaying not just the incident, the latest incident that took place. So when you get a TRO, you need to relay, okay, this happened yesterday or the day before, and the details of the most immediate incident of abuse, but also you need to relay all prior incidents of abuse historically. Okay. So if you've been in a relationship for a period of, could be 2 years, could be 20 years, and it was an abusive relationship, verbally, emotionally, psychologically, remember, it does not need to be only physical. And if you've had a history and that abuse escalated over time, which then resulted you to have to get the TRO, absolutely, it's important to even keep a record of all these incidents because that's important for TRO. But yes, filing a police report, because then there is a record that you didn't just, and there's one other thing that I wanted to highlight, and this is a case that, something that I've personally worked with a survivor on, which was an eye-opener for a lot of agencies, that there have been situations, unfortunately, where the abuser has wrongly framed the survivor as the abuser.
That's a really scary thing. It's terrifying.
Yeah, and those were the situations where the survivor called us and said, I have a criminal charge against me because my abuser is saying that I'm abusing the children, and I'm abusing. And of course we asked, was there a police report that you ever filed for the abuse that you experienced? And this is why it's important, because if the police
Oof.
only see your abuser's account, then that's the police report that's in the record when the prosecutor is looking at criminal charges.
That's really scary. Because I've actually heard of that. Sometimes even messy divorces, for example. You know, I've seen that where just to maybe get access to the children, they you know, I don't know, you never know what's true or what's not, so you have to, you know, but it's hard to analyze those type of things. And that's a very, very interesting topic. By the way, there's a lot of people live here. If any of you guys have any questions, you know, feel free to type it in there, and you know, we could, you know, ask Navneet right now. But is there anything that comes to mind that you think that we might have missed that is important to touch on? Yes. Okay. Go ahead.
Speaking, I think we can't end the conversation without talking about immigration.
Yes. Okay.
And the impact immigration has, and the connection between immigration and domestic violence, especially in the South Asian community, but also in the broader immigrant community. This is not just something that impacts South Asians, but really any immigrant community. And it's something that's been more of a concern with the current administration and more of a concern over the years more recently. So we see a very disturbing dynamic where the survivors that we sometimes, very often, the survivors that we work with, their immigration status is dependent on their abuser. So if you picture and imagine a situation where, for example, you got married and you were brought from any part of South Asia or any country really, and you came here as a dependent on a derivative visa on your abuser. Imagine that situation where the power and control there's a whole different level, layer added to that, because your status depends on that abuser. And just going back to how that plays out legally with the criminal charge, some of the situations we've seen are that the abuser will use that as a tactic and deliberately file a criminal charge against the survivor just so they can be subject to deportation. And so that's
oh God, there's a lot of scary stuff here, but that's why it's so important to have an organization like you to be able to provide that information. So another quick thing, I just want to ask, do you guys service every I know that you have a focus on South Asian, but can anyone call or
yes,
okay,
anyone. Of course, we're a South Asian domestic violence agency, but we do serve survivors who are not South Asian. We've had survivors who've called us, and we've supported them in the same way, and we've provided services because at the end of the day, we recognize that domestic violence does not discriminate.
Of course.
It impacts everyone, all ethnicities, races, everyone from different socioeconomic status, immigration status, in the same way. So we do provide that support to everybody.
Beautiful. Thank you. And so another thing I want to reiterate again is, anyone could be an abuse victim, right? It doesn't matter if you're 15 years old, 5 years old, 60 years old, 70 years old. Age doesn't play a role here. Everyone, unfortunately, can be abused. Your race, you could be statistically more likely to be women, but there are some men out there that, if you need help, you could also reach out. Relationship type, boyfriend, girlfriend, stalkers, I don't, it could be anyone.
Stalking, that's a big one that we see. And again, now we have situations where stalking takes place not just in person,
online,
but on social
exactly.
Online. And that is a very serious and significant form of abuse that we see, whether it's a dating relationship or your ex or your husband or, within families, between parent and children too, though, sometimes. So stalking is something that is definitely a very serious form of abuse. And again, it's not always recognized very easily by people experiencing it, and harassment. But and so is human trafficking. That's another one that we
oh my gosh,
a lot of.
I think that if you are being abused, guys, yes, make your police reports. But I also think another thing that popped into my head is keep a record. Like if you could find a way to keep a record while keeping it hidden, like maybe a diary or even an online diary somewhere, kind of like putting dates, times, what happened, you know, having something laid out like that would also probably help. Of course, I think the number one most helpful thing is if it was done in an official way, if you made a police report, that would of course be the best. But if you know, you could find a way to kind of journal, you know, the abuse, it'll help you in the long run as well. Anything else? Yeah, go ahead.
Yes. There's one thing that you just mentioned which triggered a thought, and I think it's important to share, just to you know, be responsible on this, is that
Sure.
when if and when you decide, and again I'll reiterate, this decision really lies with the survivor. So a lot of the time survivors call us and they'll say, you know, even when you ask the question, should I file a police report?
Yeah.
To be honest, the absolute correct answer there is, if you as a survivor feel that you are in an unsafe situation, and by doing so it won't make it more unsafe,
Yeah.
but it's a decision that lies, as advocates we never ever tell survivors what to do. We basically offer options, and we have our services, but the ultimate decision lies with the survivor. And with the police report, there is one piece or nugget that's important for people to know, that you know, we've had situations where the survivor may feel that I want to report, but I don't want any action to be taken.
Yeah.
We've had that situation.
That's, you could do that. Yeah, you can make a police report and just be like, I don't want anything done. I'm just giving you a record.
But the only exception to that is, that's what I was reading, that we've had situations where the survivor might think, I'm just reporting it as a record and, you know, it'll be the end of it, it'll scare him off. Now, the exception there is, when the survivor is filing this police report and there are visible injuries, or if there are, well, to be honest, if there's anything that the police perceive as, you know, looking at it and saying, okay, the person reporting, if the police look at them and feel that they have such injuries, or they have visible signs, they have visible signs where there's a concern, you know, injuries is the obvious one, they will arrest the abuser regardless of whether or not the survivor wants them to. So I just want people to know that, you know, it's one of those things where even the police's hands are tied in that moment, that even if the survivor says to the police, oh, I don't want you to arrest them, I don't want you to do anything, if the injuries are such or severe, and this is something where the police have to make that determination. If they see someone with visible injuries, they will take the action of their own accord.
Yeah, I mean, and the police also have, sorry, go on.
No, I was just saying that's something to be aware of, where sometimes survivors feel that, oh, you know, we weren't aware of that, or we weren't told, or, so that's why the two things to take away. The first piece is, ultimately it's the survivor's decision. No one can and no one should tell the survivor
what to do.
Take X, Y, Z action. You decide. But we are here to support you all the way. And in terms of the legal side, what the police may do or may not do, again, we cannot give you legal advice. I think it's important that you seek legal advice from an attorney. Manavi can certainly offer legal clinics, and we offer half-an-hour consultations, which are free by attorneys. Yeah, we offer legal clinics. You can call us. We can arrange a legal clinic with wonderful, dedicated attorneys who offer pro bono advice.
That's amazing.
And they can walk you through the pros and cons of reporting, all these things I talked about, any legal piece, and rely on their advice.
Well, yeah, and one thing that kind of came up to is, like, these police officers, they're trained to see a dangerous situation developing, right? So they're not going to just do that to make it a harder time for you. Like, there may be instances where they think that, you know, maybe your life or somebody else's life is in danger right now, and that they're making that decision based on their training, right? So there might be two sides to this. Yes, there's a risk that they could take action, but they might have to take action because, you know, this could get really bad, right? So they need to, like, you know, do their, you know, their thing there, you know, you know, that's all amazing, you know, information there. Does anyone have any questions on the live? Nothing yet as of yet. And is there anything else, Navneet, that you think that we should kind of touch upon?
We also have, I think, I don't know if I mentioned this economic empowerment program.
Okay.
That's another program that we have. So, where we really make sure that, we have dedicated advocates who work and work with survivors to make sure that they are given resources on job skills, training, resume writing, and just, everything to make sure that they can become financially independent. So it's like a whole process that we follow and a program dedicated specifically to that.
So we just got a quick question here. They specifically mentioned South Asian communities, but this might actually be for anyone. What about abuse from in-laws, family members of the partner as well?
That's a big one. So when I was referring to family violence, absolutely. Abuse from in-laws is a big one that we see, and it's unfortunately, it's a huge issue within the South Asian community that we see. And yes, if you're living, and we've had many situations, where we've had survivor living with the in-laws, and the in-laws and the husband or the partner, in this case was husband, they were gang up, and they were all of them were part of the abuse against the survivor. In that instance, you would get a temporary restraining order against all of them. It wouldn't just be, so, if that's the route that you wanted to go, or if you filed a police report, then that's the route that you would go and mention all of them. But yes, abuse from in-laws is very real.
Scary. Yeah, it's very real. And now it kind of brought up a situation that I was aware of, where in that particular situation, when the police were, questioned, they said that is, the other spouse's parents. You can't kick them out. Is that, maybe that's a legal question, but so like where like the abused victim went to the police and were like, for example, husband's parents are here, they're also being abusive to me, can I kick them out? And so there was a gray line there, where they were like, well, that's your husband's parents, they're allowed to be there, he owns that property too. So is that, that might be more geared towards an attorney, but
it is a legal question. But I just want to mention that your name does not have to be on the lease, or you don't need to be if you're a survivor, like a victim, your name doesn't have to be on the lease or property for you to be able to stay there safely and ask if you're getting a TRO, and for the abuser to have to leave. And the abuser could be the husband or in-laws. Now, obviously, I am cautious because every case is different. Every set of facts are different. Yes. And we don't want to border on anything that's construed as legal advice. So anything that's basically legal advice or legal question, absolutely, I think it's important that you connect with us, and we can connect you with our attorneys. Yeah. And also our hotline can do that. But you don't need to worry about that. Oh, I don't own the house, so I can't get a temporary restraining order to say that my husband needs to leave. But please do contact me.
Yeah. I mean, of course, you'll have to. Each situation is different. What was the hotline number again for anyone else that just joined?
The hotline number is 732-435-1414. And also, I also wanted to mention the New Jersey State Hotline.
Oh, that's great.
The New Jersey State Hotline is 1-800-572-7233. And ours, again, is 732-435-1414. And you can contact us at manavi@manavi.org by email, or also Instagram and Facebook, and message us. And of course, usually people can come in person, but right now during the pandemic, and we're based in New Brunswick, but we serve survivors across the state in New Jersey. And also we also work with survivors in different states sometimes. That's happened. Who've needed help, and we work with them. And also something called transnational abandonment, where survivors are abandoned like back home or in India or any part of the country. We have worked and are currently still working with survivors in those situations, because the husband has the kids and they've abandoned the wife or the partner in their country. And it's very sad and again heartbreaking for me and all of us. but where mothers are separated from their children as form of abuse.
I can't even
And
imagine
children,
this. Like, there's so many different types of abuse, and of course, guys. I mean, if they can't, Manavi can't help you specifically, I'm sure they'll provide any, resources for you, for someone who maybe can help you. So like maybe if you're located in a completely different state where they might not be able to help you, they might be able to get you in touch with someone in your area that could actually help you. I'm sure you guys over the years have many resources.
yes, so we have, a lot of our sister agencies throughout the country who I'm very close to, and we have a very close connection and bond, and we kind of just make sure that we refer survivors to. So there's many South Asian agencies throughout the country. There's Sakhi in New York, there's Raksha, there's Adhikar, there's like a whole range of agencies. There's Daya in Houston. So there are many South Asian organizations, and they're all sister agencies that we work closely with, and we can refer them to you. Also, we are part of a New Jersey state coalition, and nowadays I'm actually on the call with them practically all the time, thanks to Zoom. So we are all of us connect with all the DV agencies in New Jersey, not necessarily South Asian, but all DV agencies across the state. So we can connect you with any other DV agency in your county. And we have connections with them. So absolutely, we offer resources and referrals the time.
So we're about to get kicked off, unfortunately, because Instagram Live only allows us to do 1 hour interviews. But thank you so much, and for your time. You're doing an amazing, amazing thing for so many people out there. And any last words to reach out? Yeah, go ahead.
Well, one last thing I want to, of course, reach out. We are here for you anytime. But I also want to say that we're, the only way that Manavi is able to do the work that we do, and we've been doing it for 35 years, is by support and support from the community and from all of you out there. So I just really, and right now that is even more of a concern for us. So funding is always something that most nonprofits struggle with. So my one request would be that, if you're able to support Manavi in any way, no matter what the donation might be or whatever you're able to do. Again, if you go on our website, manavi.org, and there's a donate button, you can, any amount will go a long way for us. And it can be a one-off donation, it can be a small amount that's recurring. But I just want to say that those things are important because we also provide groceries to all the survivors in Ashiana. So we maintain that facility. So any funds that and right now that's been a huge challenge for us. So anything that you're able to do will go a long way.
Guys, donate, right? And you're going to get a donation from me after this, that's for sure. I mean, of course, you're doing such an amazing thing. So donate, guys, help out the cause. If you need help, reach out. And I'm going to be asking for some of this details from you again so that later on I can post it out later and maybe more people can get. Thank you so much, Navneet. And thank you to my,
you can also donate Facebook and Instagram as well.
Beautiful. And I'm going to check it out. I'm going to donate from 3 different ways. But thank you so much. You were wonderful. And Manavi, the organization, thank you so much for doing what you're doing and you being part of it. Guys, that's all. Make sure, I want everyone to know, and I always end my videos as, this is a crazy time right now. We will thrive again. We will get back to normal. Stay positive, stay strong, because negativity spreads faster than any, virus can. So just stay positive, everyone. And thank you so much again.
So much for having me. I really appreciate it. Thanks, Harveer. Thank you all.
Bye.